Right, picture this. The year is 2012. The only Transformers game you know is the Wii version of Revenge of the Fallen, which is alright, I guess. But one day, you see a trailer for a new Transformers game. August 28th, 2012, 10 years ago today, as long as I've made this video in time. You get the game, you put the disc in your Xbox 360, and the rest is history.
Lost. Leaving our home is the hardest decision I've ever had to make.
Story is the podcast. God, the failures of the Battletron. Oh, your city lies in dust. Oh, your city lies in dust. My friend.
Metroplex needs the call of the last pride. This is what you chose, Prime, when you defied me. All of this is your doing. This universe, no matter how vast, will never be big enough for you and I to coexist.
What's up my diggity dogs, my name is Buttermaster42 and today I will be telling you why Transformers Fall of Cybertron is my favourite game. I'll be going over the main aspects of the game such as the gameplay and the phenomenal story mode. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe so I can afford to feed my crippling being alive addiction, and also because this video has been in production since June, so it's been like 3 months. If you wanted to hear about the development of the game however, I recommend Randomblackgamer's video as it covers all of that. I will link it in the description below. The gameplay for Fall of Cybertron looks like your traditional shooter at first, but there's more to it than just that. You can transform. Whoa, I would have never known! But technically there are 2 vehicle modes. There's the traditional vehicle mode that lets you go neon, but there is a different kind of vehicle mode gameplay called Stealth Force, which allows you to use a predetermined weapon based on your character and trades your speed for maneuverability. Speaking of weapons, the game features so many weapons there are probably ones I've never used despite having the game for 10 years. This game's story features a multitude of characters which each have slight differences in their movements. Like, you're not going to see Megatron moving as fast as Bumblebee. Along with that, each character has a specific ability These range from Cliffjumper's Cloaker, Vortex's Shockwave, and Optimus's ability to wipe out the non-believers.
What was that noise?
Sometimes an ability would be copied to another character, like how Jazz and Swindle both have the grappling ability, but most characters have unique abilities. Each level in the game was suited to these abilities and characters, such as levels for flying characters having very little ground because look at that, you're not making that jump no matter how hard you press the A button. Your weapons can be upgraded through Teletran 1 terminals throughout story mode, making Teletran 1 the biggest war profiteer in Cybertronian history. All these elements come together to create a play style that perfectly captures what it's like to be a Cybertronian. Alright, let's go to the multiplayer. Oh yeah, unfortunately the servers for all Transformers games published by Activision had been shut down a few years ago. For the main part of the multiplayer you had 4 different character classes that could be highly customized. Infiltrator, basically Bumblebee or anyone else small, Destroyer, like Optimus and Ironhide, Titan, the heavy units like Megatron, and finally Scientist, which is just the healers and flyers. These custom characters would be used in traditional game modes such as Team Deathmatches or Capture the Flags. For Escalation, however, it would give you the option of 4 characters from story mode, whether they were playable or not in single player, and it would place you in a small room, and you could use points to purchase either weapons or to unlock more areas of the map. Shortly after starting the script for this video, a YouTuber called RoboGamer1HD has created something called Transformers Re-energized, which brings back the servers for the High Moon games on PC and PS3. So basically every version I don't have. I'm planning on bringing it to 360, so I hope it's before this video is done because I would love to get some footage of me and the boys playing Team Deathmatch and Escalation like back in the old days when the original servers were still up. In order to talk about the story of Fall of Cybertron, we're going to need to talk about War for Cybertron's story first, so I'll summarise it real quick. Megatron goes to Starscream's house to steal his lean. After kidnapping both Zeta Prime and Megatron, he gets Primus himself high on lean. Optimus goes on a rescue mission to get Zeta Prime out of Horny jail, but Soundwave put him through enough BDSM to kill him. Optimus takes the body of Zeta back to the council and they grant him the rank of Master, Prime. He then takes the lads to go see Primus, who gives Optimus his homework hard drive, and then goes into a food coma, so now the planet can't create any more G-fuel. The Autobots start leaving the planet, but Megatron turns Starscream's house into a big laser, and Optimus sends 2/5 of the aerial bots to blow it up, but it turns out the big laser was Tripticon the whole time, who then falls over onto Cybertron, and Optimus shoots his nips enough to make him keel over. Optimus then starts building Noah's Ark so he could beat 2 of every animal into submission, and that's the story of the first game. The story begins in the final climactic battle on the Ark. Wait, what? Normally I wouldn't like this kind of narrative technique, but as the game was advertised to focus on the escape from Cybertron, this opening chapter isn't spoiling much. You start off in the bridge of the ship with Optimus, and the Decepticons start flying in through the window. After a quick aiming tutorial from Ratchet, Megatron hacks into the Ark, and after Optimus leaves, the Ark power starts failing, so you start going off to fix it. You witness a few Timmies getting turned to dust on the way, and once you finally restore power and reactivate the defences, you're allowed to transform and you've got a long drive, you pass the Bruticus, and eventually you'll reach Optimus, who's been fighting Megatron this whole time. Looking back, I'm glad they chose to do this as the first level, as it leaves a much better first impression level that is chronologically first. Speaking of chronologically first, Chapter 2 takes place 6 Earth days before the Ark spawns. At the start of this chapter, everything seems to be going well. Optimus is getting ready to herd his Autobots onto the Ark, but then Megatron sends in a warp cannon. It's just a big gun to shoot the Ark. So Optimus heads down to the Autobot base where he foreshadows the next part of the game and then helps Ratchet in a game of Surgeon Simulator. With the help of Warpath and Little Timmy's expert fighting skills, you reach the Nerve Center and Perceptor tells you about some really big guns you can use to take out Megatron's other really big guns. Something that becomes apparent very quickly in this level is that this game has a lot of Easter eggs in it. The main ones are audio logs located throughout most levels,
Among Us.
but there are also normal Easter eggs hidden in each level. Some of my favourites are Soundwave and Laserbeak appearing at the top of a room in this next level.
Soundwave superior, Autobots inferior.
Starscream's crown being wearable in his level,
Yes, all shall bow before me.
and of course, who could forget the dancing lever in the jazz level. While you're travelling to the first neutron gun, that's what the big guns are called by the way, you're interrupted by the first new enemy, the Leaper.
Hello there.
He's your traditional shoot them in the back enemy from all your favourite shooting games. After a failed attempt to stop Mass Timmy's side, the first neutron gun is up and ready. For some reason the music becomes a theme from the movies. I don't know why, I've always found it odd. With the first neutron gun online, you unlock Optimus's ability, which is to summon an artillery strike, which you immediately get to use on a Decepticon Marauder, which is basically a tank with legs. On your way to the second gun, you reroute some energon to be able to open a door, which I'm sure won't have any other consequences later. One ambush and one Megatron hologram later, you reach the second neutron gun, so instead of being controlled of your mind, you get to pilot it and defend Ironheart and the entire Decepticon army. Although once you take out most of them, the gun stops working, so you start making your way to...
Optimus! My readings just spiked! What happened? The door shut on its own.
You start following the mysterious moving rooms until you reach some kind of core and pull the final switch of the lever, and then this happens.
Metroplex heeds the call of the last prime.
This blew my tiny 9-year-old mind when I first saw this. Up to this point, the biggest transformer I've seen was Devastator from Revenge of the Fallen, so seeing an entire building turn into Metroplex was insane. So now Optimus and Metroplex get to go on a journey together and start destroying all the warp cannons. I love how throughout this level, whenever you see a huge army of Decepticons, Metroplex just takes them all out instantly. It really shows how powerful he is. You meet up with Warpath for a little bit at the second warp cannon, but when you finally reach the third one,
Metroplex, no!
nuts. Well, it was cool while it lasted. You make your way across the bridge and into the final warp cannon, and...
Surprise, motherfucker!
Well, this level is just full of surprises. You wake up in what I assume is the last warp cannon. It was never stated why this part happens. But this is my favourite cutscene of the entire game.
Yo, dudes, the Empire's pretty chill. Maybe you could, join it or something.
Go watch it on YouTube if you don't have the game. So once Megatron finishes his speech, a familiar face appears behind him, and then the entire roof of the room is torn open, and for the only time in the whole game, you get to play as Metroplex. And you get to give Megatron a big ol' walloping. Yes, he is actually dead. He just killed Megatron. But from the first level, we know he's coming back, but that comes later. Throughout the last 2 levels, characters had been talking about Grimlock going missing, so for the next few levels, you get to investigate his disappearance with Jazz and Cliffjumper. Once you arrive at an old temple in the Sea of Rust, you find out that Grimlock did take a sip there, but there's no sign of Grimlock. You pass some Decepticons and activate your cloaking device. Wait a minute. Red Transformer. Cloaking device. Oh no, not again! If you just had flashbacks at that level, don't worry, because you actually get to keep your guns for the whole level, so the stealth is more optional. Until you get to this guy, but we'll get to him in a second. First, You must get across the world's quietest crane.
See? Yeah, that wasn't loud at all.
We then enter a room with this guy who doesn't look too bad until he sees you and does that. So just don't get seen by him, okay? Good. You know, all these one-eyed enemies in this level reminds me of someone, but I just can't remember who. Oh yeah, well, we get to a big empty room, which would normally mean a boss fight, but this time it's just a nice walk up some stairs while looking at holograms of the universe. Because this is when the plot actually starts going somewhere. Turns out Shockwave found a space bridge built by the Ancients to explore the universe, but the Decepticons want to use it to find another planet with lots of energy, and guess where that happens to be? It's a planet where you all know that starts with an E. That's right, it's Europa. Thanks for that, Harvey. I had to ask him about planets with an E. You finally meet up with Jazz again, but then the rust storm brings down most of the room, so now it's you, Jazz, and about 4 Decepticons. Jazz detects an Autobot distress beacon, so you both have to get there, but the Decepticons are blocking the hole it's in. So Jazz makes a bomb out of toxic energon. You then go through a really slow escort mission and blow the lid wide open. You'd think the guy called Cliff Jumper would go down the hole, but nope, it's Jazz. It's a good thing too, considering grappling is much more useful in this level than being invisible. Turns out that the Autobot signal was coming from Sludge, or what was left of him. You take out part of his memory and listen to the last thing he heard. Fun. If you couldn't tell from the look of this place already, you're in an Insecticon nest hive thing. So they start coming to try and nibble Jazz, so it's a good idea to blow up the nest and run immediately. You get back to following an energy signature and discover an entire lake of energon which is being used to power the space bridge that Shockwave is testing. So after many, and I mean many, sniper enemies, you finally get to where Shockwave is doing his testing, and Cliff Jumper did a stupid, and now you have to fight a horde of Insecticons while Cliff Jumper is trapped figuring out how to blow up everything. Everything does start blowing up, so you have to get going as fast as you can in a chase that reminds me a bit of the one in the Chaos Prison from the first game. And then you get picked up by Sideswipe, the coolest Uber driver ever. And then you tell Prime about the energon, and Ironhide says they could use an old transport to bring it in, which brings us right up to the next few levels. So the Autobots now have all the energon in their big bus, and Starscream doesn't like that one bit, so him and Onslaught thought of an overcomplicated plan to steal it. So first we have to play as Vortex, best Combaticon, don't at me, and blow up a bridge. Finally, I can get my revenge for every time I fell in a hole in those damn bridges. This is also our first time playing as Decepticon in this game, and a flying character at that. So you get to practice your flying in the ruins of Iacon and avoid lasers and probes. And then you fight actual enemies, and when you reach the bridge for Broad to destroy it, his missiles do nothing. Imagine getting beat by a bridge. So guess who has to go in there and turn off the bridge seals? Why does a bridge have this much protection, you ask? Because not everyone can fly. You know how many little Timmies will get stuck if you get rid of every bridge on Cybertron? Don't answer that, I know it's only 7. Even after destroying the supports on both sides of the bridge, it's still standing. So you need to go into the center, thanks to Brawl's hole. When you get to the support in the center, you have to fight a huge Autobot. He's easy if you have missiles, because just hitting him will also hit his healing zones. Once the bridge is destroyed, you play as Swindle, who has to stop Starscream from getting the whole Decepticon army killed because he doesn't know what anti-aircraft guns actually suit at. Once you take out all the wheels and 2 more Titan Autobots, the transport starts flying, but luckily, as I said earlier, Swindle has a grappling hook like Jazz. Once on board the transport, you start taking out some of the thrusters so the Decepticons can catch up to you because you're currently the only Decepticon there. You take out the 2 main AA guns, and something I like is how you take them out differently each time. For the first one, you just shoot all the bullets before they can fire them, but for the second one, the Autobots actually sabotage the lever, so you have to pilot a Decepticon dropship and destroy the last one. Now that that's taken care of, we get to one of the coolest sections of the game. That's right, we get to play as the man, the myth, the legend, Bruticus. I think this is the first time in Transformers game history that we get full control over a combiner. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments though. I love how the little Timmies are implying this is the first time Bruticus has been used in combat because they're all so confused. After you quite literally mow through the little Timmies to get to the control room, you finish the level with the Combaticons crashing the transport and Starscream arresting them for defying his orders of abandoning the transport when it started going down. While Starscream is off to execute the Combaticons or something, I don't know, two boys walk in the
Soundwave's old workshop.
and when they leave, Soundwave wakes up and is like, you know what? I'm bringing my homie back from hell. So he pops his kids out and they start working together to rebuild Megatron. I like you can just summon Rumble and Laserbeak whenever you want. There's not much reason to do it here, but in a later level there is. So Megatron wakes up and uses violence. He then goes straight upstairs to quote the 1986 movie, which for some reason starts happening a lot from this point on.
Who dares to disrupt my coronation?
Coronation, Starscream! This is bad comedy.
Megatron!
You then just fight Decepticons until they get too scared to fight back. Also, hot take, this design for Megatron is better than his Rotf Cybertron because now he actually has a neck. After you set Starscream up, Brawl references the Constructicons and Shockwave shows up and says he copy and pasted the space blitz from the Sea of Rust, but they need a good spaceship to get to the portal and Megatron knows just the guy. Megatron is just chilling in his ship and then he jumps out and lands near where Tripticon fell in the first game. So Megatron goes on a quest to find him. After scaring a couple of Autobots and seeing Bruticus' chivalry,
Megatron, your path is clear.
you reach the building where Tripticon is being held. After you reassemble him like a Bionicle, Soundwave transforms him into the Nemesis. I like how they brought the Nemesis into this to make it connect to Prime more. If you're thinking I didn't say much for these two levels, you're right, because these are my least favourite ones, because practically nothing happens in it other than the part at the end where you actually start getting Tripticon ready. I mean, there's a cool part where Laserbeak shows up and opens a door for you, but that's all there is. But the best of the game is still yet to come. Something I noticed in my most recent playthrough of the game is that all the different sections of the story connect, except this part, like Optimus's levels end of him saying,
He left his post for a reason. I want to know why. Jazz and Cliffjumper are tracking him now.
and that's exactly what you do next. But for this, it's just Megatron and Soundwave are making a big spaceship. Meanwhile, on the other side of Cybertron, is probably why I used to think these next two levels could have worked as a DLC instead of being part of the main story. This level opens with you playing as a generic Decepticon outside Shockwave's lab, and someone's hacking the computer, and you gotta help us. Despite this part only lasting 2 minutes, they try and make it a horror segment, but to be honest, LEGO Marvel 1 did horror better than this. It turns out Starscream was the one hiding out in the computer room. Turns out he's after Shockwave's latest experiment, which at this point it's made pretty obvious that it's the Dinobots. So as you play as Starscream, we have more of that good optional stealth, but this time I actually stayed undetected. Mostly because you can hack into the turrets and make them shoot all the enemies. Once you find Shockwave's main lab, you get to see him and the original 3 Insecticons doing experiments on Grimlock, who's finally appearing on screen for the first time, 4 hours into the game after being one of the most advertised characters in it. Starscream tries reasoning of Grimlock and make him work for Starscream, but he don't need no man, and he escapes with the help of Starscream's flailing body. Because they made Grimlock really big in this game, he has similar controls to Bruticus, so he uses mostly melee attacks, and his ranged attack is just throwing anything he can get his hands on. He's basically a toddler with a sword, and considering what Shockwave did to his brain, it makes sense. Normally I show mercy to the Decepticons that don't attack me, but I needed good footage for this video, so if you feel bad about them, it's your fault. You manage to rescue Swoop, and you look through a sciencey room and break physics, and you both go and fight the first of the 3 main Insecticons. Hard Cell. I think Hasbro ran out of trademark again. Hard Cell is one of the few boss fights that actually have a health bar in this game. The other ones in this list are the second AA gun from the Autobot transport, and that's it. You find what is supposedly Slug's room, and yes, I'm calling him Slug. I'm from Chavland, so I'm supposed to get offended by his original name. Also, this was my first time being introduced to the character, so he was always Slug to me. You go down the hole and enter the Insecticon hive, but this one is much bigger. Now you have to start following Kickback through the Insecticon hive so he can test you or something. When you finally catch up to him, he reminds you of how they were attacked in the hive back at the Sea of Rust, where Jazz found Sludge. And that is somehow enough to make Grimlock angry enough to finally transform into his T-Rex mode and destroy absolutely everything in his path. Honestly, the Dino mode is the one time where I prefer to fight enemies in my alt mode. Kickback is defeated by Sludge, doing another movie reference. Once you get out of the nest and you enter the outside, just take a moment to look at this. Out of all the levels, this is my favourite one aesthetically speaking. After the hardest door opening puzzle I've ever witnessed, you reach Snarl, who's getting getting his energon drained out of him by Sarpsot. Hasbro really didn't care about their character back then, did they? In order to stop Snarl from getting the died, you need to destroy the machines that's taking his energon, but you can only break them in Dino mode, so you gotta kill some buggy boys to charge it up first. Once that's done, Sarpsot gets crunched, and despite how speedy I was at destroying the sucking machines, Snarl was still dying. The Dinobots hide in an observation deck, and when the space bridge is making everything nearby collapse, Slug pulls Optimus. But my cutscene blitzed, so you can't see him. When they try to close the window, Grimlock gets blown out and Soup catches him and takes him to the tower. I really love how chaotic this part is, of the Insecticons going rampant from what I assume is the main 3 Insecticons being either killed or knocked out. Swoop literally drops the Grimlock off, and he starts making his way to Shockwave until...
You didn't think I'd build something so powerful such as you, and not have a way to control it.
I love how they make Shockwave the evil genius of a contingency plan for everything in this game, but the one thing he didn't think about was Grimlock's anime protagonist energy. He destroys the space grids and makes the portal become unstable. So the Autobots and Decepticons have to leave Cybertron right now, but the Autobots don't have enough energon to get them off Cybertron. Where are they going to get it from?
Optimus.
No, Metroplex! He sacrifices himself so that the Ark is able to take off. I don't know where they got that giant straw from, but this cutscene does a great job of showing how all the Autobots felt during the takeoff. Like, despite not saying anything, Bumblebee shows so much emotion in this one shot. And the way that there's almost no dialogue once Metroplex makes up his mind, and they just let the music carry the scene, it's just... masterpiece. This is it, the final chapter of the game. Now, I may have said that earlier had my favourite cutscene of the game, but this is my favourite moment of the game as a whole. It's this entire level. The way you can feel the struggle as you swap between character to character, faction to faction. It tests you on everything you've learned since that Bumblebee level at the start of the game. This is truly their darkest hour. The level starts on board the newly transformed Nemesis ship. After a quick explanation from Vortex,
I've mapped out precise weak points to hit. Once we've latched on, I'll start dispatching the boarding parties.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, what?
Yes, sir. Sir?
That's more like it.
you call out Rumble and you ride the tool cable into the Ark, and you can feel immediately the final battle for Cybertron begins now. You summon Rumble and Laserbeak once again. This time, instead of fixing Megatron, they get to help you fight Autobots. After Laserbeak opens a door for you, you start sabotaging the cannons the same way you did in the Swindle level. This allows the rest of the Decepticons to start breaking into the Ark with the tow cable. You then switch to Jetfire and you have to shoot the tow cables to reveal their weak spots so you can destroy them. And because you're in space, you can transform into robot mode and just float there. When all the cables are gone, Bruticus flies onto the Ark and you swap to him for one final rampage. And if the first level was anything to go on, Bumblebee should be driving around here somewhere. When playing as Bruticus, the goal is to destroy the Ark's fuel tank, in which on succession, you switch to Jazz and follow Bruticus's trail of destruction, and then you have to fight him. This game doesn't do boss fights very often, but when they do, you either get something mediocre like the Hard Cell one, or you get something amazing like this one. At first it's as simple as just shooting him over and over, but when he brings out his shield, you need to start luring him onto Jetfire's EMP mines, and then call an artillery strike on him. I swear this game puts something from every level into this last one. It's so goddamn good! After hitting Boudicca several times, he flies backwards and over Optimus and Megatron, who are currently fighting, and it's just at the moment where Bumblebee gets shot in the first level. After that, Optimus says the coolest version of this morning big enough for the two of us.
This universe, no matter how vast, will never be big enough for you and I to coexist.
Then you're presented with your final choice. Who will be your final character to play as? The heroic Optimus Prime or the evil Megatron? No matter who you choose, this is an amazing fight. I'm glad they went with grown-up styled controls for this fight, because if it was just shooting, it wouldn't be anywhere near as engaging as it is. Once the fight is over, the story concludes with this final cutscene.
No! The portal! The vortex is tearing the ship apart! No! I will not be denied!
And the rest is silence. Except for this really good credit sequence of a remix of the Touch that I won't play for copyright reasons. I know to most of you watching, that was just me talking for however long this video is, but this game is fantastic. The story may have a rocky start with not much happening within the first 3 levels, but once that Space Bridge story arc starts off, it just skyrockets in quality from there. To conclude, this game is the perfect example of what can happen when the people behind making something are long-term fans of the franchise, because this game is a love letter to any Transformers fan. In fact, this game is what introduced me to the wider Transformers brand as a whole, because before this game, all I knew about was the Bayverse. Yeah, I know, shocking. If you're a new fan or an old fan, I highly recommend trying it out, and if you're only a third-person shooter fan, you should also give it a shot. No violent puns. The game may not be available digitally anymore, but finding a second-hand copy shouldn't be too difficult. If you're interested in seeing what the entirety of the game is like without buying it, as I stated several times before, I will be streaming the entire story mode on the day of this video's release at twitch.tv/buttermaster42, so see you there till all are one.